You're listening to Opera Box Score.
Let's get ready to rumble!
Wherever you are, however you're listening, it's America's talk radio show about opera. It's Opera Box Score. I'm Weston Williams, joined this week by Oliver Camacho and Matt Cummings. All right, this week, George Cedarquist goes inside the huddle with Scott Stroman, artistic director of Highbury Opera Theatre and composer of Fever Pitch, the football opera, and by football, of course, we mean soccer. And then it's the return of Monday Evening Quarterback, where George reviews Covent Garden's Così fan tutte and Alcina at Glyndebourne. Plus, in the 2-minute drill, Renee Papa is either a fully functioning alcoholic or a homophobe, or possibly both. Stay tuned as we wade through this PR nightmare. Make sure you subscribe to our podcast to get the full show on Stitcher and Spotify. You can click follow. If you listen on Apple Podcasts, just hit that plus sign. Send us a voice memo or email us your hot takes at operaboxscore@gmail.com. You'll get an OBS beer coaster and an OBS lapel pin just for sharing your own hot take. What a deal. Oliver Camacho, how's it hanging?
Well, we took last week off not only to celebrate the independence of our great nation, but also because it was right in the middle of Wimbledon, and I'm trying to get back on a regular sleep schedule. It was a very exciting second week that ended the way we expected, and Novak Djokovic comes away with his 21st Grand Slam. But we had a surprise finalist with Nick Kyrgios, who created all sorts of scandals along the way. He got into the final because Rafael Nadal pulled out of the semis with a abdomen tear, like an abdomen muscle tear.
Not the abdomen.
I know. Yeah, I know. Brutal. But one of the many scandals that he was a part of was how he received his runners-up plate. I forget what they call it, but it's like a really nice plate. Are we
talking like a dinner dish? Is what we're talking about? What are we talking about here?
It's like a plate. It's a plate of pad thai, steaming. You know,
oh, delicious.
Oh, it sounds so nice.
Yeah. He broke the code of wearing all white on the court by putting on a red, I would assume, Nike cap when he received his award from the Duchess of Cambridge, Kate Middleton.
I assume there were audible gasps.
Which, I mean, this is a real conversation about, like, Wimbledon is so special. One of the reasons why it's so special is because of all of the traditions of Wimbledon. And in a way, the conservatism of Wimbledon is also representative of the conservatism in classical music. And I don't want to see Wimbledon become like other tournaments where everything goes out the window. But I also understand why we need these disruptors in both tennis and in classical music. So I'm of two minds about it. I don't always like the way he behaves on court, but putting on a red cap to receive his second prize award, you know what? There are other things happening in the world right now that are more important to talk about.
I certainly can't think of it.
Matt Cummings, what would you wear to when you're receiving your plate of pad thai for winning Wimbledon?
Well, I mean, I would have the decorum to keep to tradition.
I would not.
But wait. Do they make white clothes in your size?
In my size?
Yeah.
Oh, absolutely not. You have to buy like a sail from a sailboat and kind of like wrap it around me like a toga. That's the way to go. We have a special report from George all the way in England. While George was gone, of course, the government completely collapsed, but he managed to talk about quite a few things of interest other than the collapse, I assume. I cannot emphasize enough.
We're pretty sure it wasn't his fault.
We're pretty sure. We don't have any definitive proof that he was involved, but have you ever seen George Cedarquist and James Bond in the same room? I rest my case. Take it away, George.
Huddle up. Let's go inside the huddle.
Scott Stroman is a professor of jazz at the Guildhall School of Music and Drama. the artistic director of Highbury Opera Theatre in North London, and is director of music at the American International Church in London. His numerous compositions include the football-themed opera Fever Pitch, based on the Nick Hornby book of the same title, and an opera based on the play The Weekend by Michael Palin of Monty Python fame. I sat down with him on Independence Day at the Guildhall School to find out how exactly he got to the UK from the US. It's always strange to be in a foreign country on Independence Day, and it's especially odd to be in England on Independence Day.
Independence from England, from Britain.
Scott, how did you get to the UK in the first place? You originally are from Indiana.
I'm from Indiana. I did an undergraduate degree at Northern Illinois University, where I went primarily because they had a great jazz band at the time. So we had a wonderful time there. Toured with Dizzy Gillespie and Louis Bellson and many other people. And from there I went to Miami, University of Miami, where I did a master's in studio writing and production with the intent of heading toward writing film scores. While I was there, I played in lots of Latin bands, as well as worked a lot in classical music. I've always been half and half, I suppose, or I think of it as all one thing, but involved in both jazz and classical music right from the time I was a little kid. And I just want to add to that Chicago connection. We're big White Sox fans.
Oh dear.
So I'm afraid, my grandfather was a heavy duty White Sox fan, and the White Sox were on the radio every night. Whereas my wife, her dad was a Cubs fan, so he was listening to the Cubs. My granddad was listening to the White Sox, and that rubbed off onto my dad and onto me and onto my son, who now is he would love to go and play for the White Sox. He's the baseball player. He's playing over here now.
You probably would not recognize Wrigleyville or Wrigley Field at this point. Although, when was the last time you were back in the U.S.?
Oh, we go back every year, and we always go and watch at least one baseball game, if not two. So I've seen I haven't been to the stadium. Yes, I have. I've been to the stadium once since it was, what do you want to call it? Renovated, updated, made more posh. So I know what you're talking about. Yeah, you don't want to drive to Wrigley, basically. It's beautiful. I have to say it's beautiful, but you can't beat Comiskey.
Okay, so you've played with the likes of Billy Cobham, Randy Brecker, and I cannot believe that I'm not going to talk about any of those people with you now. We want to talk about opera. Okay. So you have at least two operas that I know of, Fever Pitch and The Weekend. Talk to me about how you created those two pieces, what the differences were between those.
Well, I direct the London Jazz Orchestra, and I have a choir called Eclectic Voices, a very, very nice amateur choir, which is now just past its 30th anniversary too. Very ambitious choir like that. Plus I do lots of other vocal ensembles like where we are, the Guildhall School and so forth. So I've written lots and lots of vocal music, lots of choral music. And a lot of times it's been written for amateurs, sometimes for children and all that, as well as professionals. And I found that I learned so much about composition by writing stuff that has to be practical and that people have to get engaged in and perform well. So things which I thought as a composer were essential to my music, I've learned very often aren't essential to my music, and that the heart of the music is something which can be grasped relatively quickly and then embellished, if you like, something around that. So I've always had it, what I'm getting at is I've always had a kind of dramatic narrative view about all my music, whether it's classical or jazz, however you want to. I have to stop talking about these categories because I can't really categorize it anymore. And one of the projects was something called Ringa. And this Ringa ensemble was an ensemble of about 15 variable players from the orchestra who were crossing into other boundaries of music. They were trying to expand their horizon, really. So we were working with African musicians, Indian musicians, South American musicians, jazz musicians, children, all kinds of things that orchestral musicians often don't get to do. This is a really clever, ambitious project to try to tease out new ideas for orchestral music. To also, what we found, of course, is that players in the orchestra had all these hidden talents, which were not often shown in the second violin section of a symphony orchestra, but you had people who were actually great folk players or jazz musicians or had been in rock bands or knew something about, had lived in India. Who knows? There's all these things which we tease out. So this was crossing boundaries, and that was all brought on by the director of the chief officer of the orchestra at the time, Serge Dorny. Started a whole bunch of projects. Well, Serge then moved off to France, and he's invited me to do lots of work in France. And one of the things was to conduct some Kurt Weill stage works, both operas and musicals, with the opera company, with Opera de Lyon. So this is my whole story. And this eventually led to me starting my own company in London, which is Highbury Opera Theatre. And the works that you mentioned came with that.
That is how we get to Highbury Opera Theatre, right? Highbury, one of the neighborhoods in North London.
Yes, in
We've heard
North London. Yeah.
Exactly. So we've heard a bit of the genesis of that. And so Fever Pitch was written specifically for the company.
It was. So Highbury Opera Theatre grew out of this choir, Eclectic Voices, and we had a youth choir, well, 2 youth choirs, Highbury Young Singers. And so we had a lot of people around, and there was some interest in doing a production of Noah's Flood, which I'd done before. So we did a kind of a big production of Noah's Flood, and that was great. It was fun, and there's a lot of interest, and the people like being on stage. And so out of that, sort of decided to use this as the seed of a new opera company. And yes, we started Highbury Opera Theatre, and in that company, we've now done, I think, 9 works we're up to now. I came to this. We were looking for something to do, and I just threw this crazy idea out, because I'm very keen that our company has some kind of local relevance, and that we happen to live in the neighborhood of the Arsenal football ground, of course, and also that Nick Hornby he lives here. He's nearby. His kids go to school. So I said, I'd read Fever Pitch, and I said, well, I got this idea about maybe doing something with Fever Pitch, and man, everybody just jumped on it. I thought they would say, what a stupid idea. It's not a play. It's not a story. It's football. What is football? They just loved it. And so the company commissioned Fever Pitch, and I wrote it with this wonderful librettist, Tamsin Collison. And it was just a huge success. It's worked out really well. And my own, when I started to write it, I just honestly didn't have any idea what the language would be, the musical language. I was listening to I was thinking, I didn't, because I sometimes write serial music, lots of jazz, neoclassical. I'm this sort of composite of all kinds of stuff. And to be honest, what sparked it off was her libretto, which was amazing. And peppered through the libretto, with reluctance at first, we decided to use terrace chants in a way that you might use, I don't know, chorales or something.
The terraces are kind of the bleacher bums,
exactly,
of the football stadium. Yes,
and in football here in Britain, there are songs which are related to every team, and you hear these little chants all the way around. There's about a dozen of them which everybody knows and starts singing them during the match, and some of them are nice and some of them aren't very nice. But I thought, I don't want to cheapen it by using these chants. In fact, it turned out to be a wonderful thing to do, because you could use those as a sort of a cantus firmus under things, and bring in, if you were in a dramatic scene, for example, that had nothing to do with football, and all of a sudden you brought out a theme that you recognize from the terrace, it's like another character walking on the stage. So I wrote this piece, and the idea was it was perfectly laid out for it, because it had a small team of professionals. That's how we always work here. 5 professional singers at the center of it, the main characters. But it also followed the life of this guy, our main character, which we called Gunner. They're the Gunners. Arsenal are the Gunners. And at one point when they got a bit rough, they started being called Gooners. So this guy is called Gunner, and talks about him getting infatuated with football from a very young age, and basically being disappointed for the rest of his life. That's the world of the White Sox fan, right? The Cubs up until both. We know about this coming from Chicago. I could smell this story. Every year. This is the year for the White. This is the year. No, not again. That's the Arsenal for you. So this tracks this guy's life through from being a young child to adulthood, and that's perfect, because that means you can have scenes with kids from local schools who are involved, and you want normal kids, and then he's in kind of secondary school, high school age, and then he's an adult, and and he goes through his love life and everything. It's all related to the ups and downs of the football team. That's essentially what the story is that his life tracks up and down with the success or failure of the Arsenal Football Club. Now that makes that the great thing about that is it gives it a universal appeal. It's not just for football fans. It's not even about football. It's about obsession and about how we kind of avoid the realities of our life, and we replace them with some kind of false other thing. It happens to be football for a lot of people, for this character, but it might be anything else, right, that you have in life. Anyway, it was a brilliant libretto. The music came out great, and it suited me down to the ground because I could wind these terrace chants and these things into my language however I wanted to. So some of it's very jazzy, some of it's pretty strict. It's, I don't know what you call it, but it gets dark sometimes, And so the end result was a big success, and it involved nearly 100 people on stage, and we used a band of 11 people, and we have a great local venue. Union Chapel is a big old, they call it nonconformist chapel here. That was actually built for music back at the end of the 19th century, and it's a nice open space, and it has quite a big space in the front. So it's a chapel, but it works pretty well as a dramatic venue, drama venue. They have lights and sound and everything, and it's almost walking distance from the Arsenal Stadium. So interesting. I never thought of this thing, but it was just stupid to think about. But all the reviews mentioned how the Arsenal Stadium was like the new cathedral, the cathedral of football. And here we are kind of in the cathedral it just worked great as it kind of brought an extra, you as a director would appreciate that. You look at this place, you think, I've got another character here and I don't even have to hire them. They're already here. Beautiful venue. You're always thinking about the issues of what life is about. So that was Fever Pitch.
You do, as a director or creator, you want the piece to fire on multiple levels, right?
Absolutely.
Text, music, community,
Perfect.
venue.
Yeah.
The Weekend was also an adaptation of a Michael Palin
That's
book,
right.
but this happened in 2021, right? So now we're in
then we hit
pandemic.
That's right. We hit pandemic time. So on the back of one thing about doing a piece of such size, which you would imagine financially, it actually worked out quite well doing Fever Pitch. We raised some money, as we all do with these little companies, from the Arts Council, from donors, from here and there. We did pretty good ticket sales. So we actually erased about 4 or 5 years of debt on that one show, which is a pretty amazing thing to do with a new piece of music. But it was a big task. All those people, also we had workshops. We had more than 1,500 kids come and see special school performances. So we're on a pretty big scale here. The venue holds 600 people. And whenever you have lots of people involved, you have lots of conversations with lots of people, so it was pretty exhausting to do, and took all of our efforts to pull it off. After that, we had this little gap where we're trying to reassess our next 2 or 3 years, and then bang, the pandemic came in the middle of that. In the meantime, I had been reading Michael Palin's diaries. I like to read diaries of people, and I'm really, like a lot of people, interested in Monty Python a lot, but particularly Michael. He's got a lot more going on than just Monty Python. He's a really good writer and a very observant person. And he lives, again, bike ride from my house. He lives here in North London, and I also knew him as a very community-minded spirit. So Tamsin, my librettist, had worked with him on an audiobook of his diaries. That's one of the things she does. In addition to writing, she also directs for radio and audiobooks. So she had met Michael and found him very amenable. And between the two of us, we contacted him and told him, I told her I had this idea about The Weekend. And I'd read Michael's diaries. And then as a result of that, I'd read a lot of other things that he'd written, including this play, which was kind of lost, really. It was produced in the early 90s and kind of semi-successful and kind of disappeared into the ether a bit. But I read it and I just sensed that there was more life in this piece. And I started to get in my head, I could imagine the flow and the sort of set piece that it needed at the end as an opera and so forth. So anyway, we approached Michael. Michael came to see the Fever Pitch and he really liked it. And he said, "This is great." He said, he said, "I have no idea why you want to turn my play into an opera. I can't imagine it. But if you think you can do it, you have my blessing. Go ahead." So we set off to do it. And then over the next couple of years, it turned out to be, I thought it was going to be 6 months, but again, pandemic hit and everything. Over the next couple of years, we formed this together into this basically 85 minute one act opera based on his play. And for lots of reasons, I wanted to have a chorus involved. I mean, for one thing, the purpose of the company is always to work between amateurs and professionals. So even though this play didn't involve children, I wanted to have an amateur chorus, and it worked perfectly for this particular story because it peaks out at a dinner party, or we turn it into a big cocktail party, and you need lots of participants at the cocktail. That's our La Boheme moment, when everybody's there and it's all going crazy, and then basically all hell breaks loose. So we added a chorus in, and then additionally made that chorus into a Greek chorus for the rest of it, who argue back and forth or become the kind of the conscience of the lead character. So the lead character who's really conflicted all the way through here. It's very funny, but he's also very conflicted all the way through, and he has this kind of constant discussion, argument with the chorus, who are his two sides of his brain, really. So we ended up with a piece which we had 22 people on stage in the chorus, and then these 5 main characters, and again a kind of a little orchestra of 10 people. And that's how it was constructed: professional orchestra, professional leads, amateur chorus, and they took some minor roles. Finally, we managed to produce that in a Bloomsbury Theatre, which is at the University of London here, last September. But it was a struggle, and keeping it going. We'd started into the beginnings of it. I always workshop these things and write a little bit, try a little bit on, and then add a bit more. That became very difficult during the pandemic. But we did manage halfway through the pandemic, when we had a little gap, to get the whole chorus together, to get them to memorize their parts, and then to do a concert video recording. And that turned out to be essential, because that was 8 months before we finally did the production, and that meant we had a fully formed, at least first draft, that everybody had even memorized their parts before we started to put it on stage. It also gave me a little bit of time to improve the ending, which turned out to be essential. So that's the basic thing. Now, Michael's part in this was really critical. First of all, he gave his agreement to us, and he said, "I don't care what you do with it." He said, "I'd like to read what you've done, but I don't want to, I'll contribute some ideas, but I don't want to have any I don't care about it." He said, "This piece didn't quite ever do what I thought it would do. See what you can do with it." And we came back with a new take on it, especially with this chorus thing. He absolutely loved it. He got really behind it. He came to rehearsals. He read the script. He made some suggestions. He helped. He actually unlocked a new idea for the ending, which set us off. We after that first recording, we knew we had a good piece, but we knew the ending was still not quite right. I knew it wasn't right. It just wasn't. These pieces are harder to finish than to start. And he just, in a couple of comments at a coffee at his house, he just nailed it. And I just thought, of course, bang, went off and wrote the ending. So he was essential, and he's still essential, because we now want to see it, have some legs around the world. And Michael's support is obviously critical, but it's genuine. Both of these guys, with Nick Hornby and with Michael, we weren't trying to attach ourselves to star names. It was really me thinking, here's some people who are really well known for one thing, but actually there's some other part of them which I think needs illuminating, and they probably will be interested in that. And that's exactly what's happened. If you have a favorite piece which has a baby, which somehow didn't quite do what you thought it do, sometimes it's nice for someone else to come in and say, "Let me help you with your baby a little. Maybe I can get inspiration from your thing and help it to grow into a fully formed thing."
So, here we are, hopefully into the next normal. You're a creator, you're a teacher. What does the future look like in terms of your teaching, in terms of your composition as we come out of this pandemic? Has anything changed fundamentally for you?
Well, I've gotten older, a few years have gone by while this stuff is going on, It does make you reassess, and especially when you get up to a kind of certain age, you start to think about what's the best use of your resources. I've spent my whole life as a kind of scattergun effect, zooming from this to that, playing jazz and writing opera and conducting orchestras and doing lots of working with children and kids and stuff. And the main thing I need to do right now for myself is to pull a lot of this stuff together. I have a lot of pieces I've written. I haven't published very much of it because I'm always on to the next thing. And so I want to get those things, like I mentioned about, I have some pieces now I feel very proud about. I feel that they're finished. Composers very often think it still needs another edit, needs another run through, it's not quite right, and I've often been like that. And luckily I get the chance to revisit lots of the music that I've done in the past, and every time I do, I think I improve it a bit. But I have some pieces now, and especially these stage works, which I think should be being performed in other places. with me directing them or not. Most of the music I've written, I've directed, and I've been part of the package. But I'm also aware as a composer that you need to provide something that other people can do without you being standing there, And so I've tried to get better and better at that. So I suppose that's the main thing I want to do. I now have, after the huge effort of putting on these 2 shows, and they have been huge for different reasons. I mean, working through that pandemic and rehearsing over Zoom and trying to get venues to get people on the phone. I mean, it's impossible. It took, and again, you're in touch with every single person. You've got to ensure they're safe. Do I really want to be in this? Because how many meters am I going to be away from the next singer? How's the ventilation in the room? Do we have the right, have we had the okays? Is the insurance, it's just a lot of stuff goes on when it gets more complicated. And during the pandemic, it's become twice as much. So that stuff has kind of been demanding. But now that we're through that, we've got a product that I'm really proud of. I'm kind of ready to start another show and think about another show. At the same time, I have to get a lot of the music that I've written out there, and that's what's really next for me.
What's the dream idea for the next opera for you?
I have one. I actually have. I don't think I can't tell you what it is.
Okay, that's fine.
I can't let the cat out of the bag. First of all, it's a big one.
Does it have anything to do with sports?
No.
Okay.
No, this I've had lots of sports thoughts, but I wasn't even looking for sports when I came up with even though I'm a big Arsenal fan, I'm actually a season ticket holder at the Arsenal. I didn't hardly get to go that year because I was writing this damn opera all the time and watching on a Saturday afternoon. I'd be there trying to finish the thing and then watching them get beat in the corner, which I think kind of contributed to the vibe of the piece, to be honest. Oh no, I can't play that. Oh no, and then the minor chord comes in, No, it's not to do with sports. This is to do with much. I can't tell you, but it's a big one, and it may not be appropriate for Highbury Opera Theatre. It might be. I think it's appropriate for something much bigger. So we will see.
Scott, thank you so much for hanging out.
Pass or fail? Here's Monday Evening Quarterback.
At the end of June, I went to the Royal Opera House at Covent Garden to see a production of Così fan tutte. And this is the production directed by Jan-Philippe Gloger, conducted by Julia Jones, the cast including a whole roster of great singers. The women, I think, really stuck out in this production. Jennifer Davis as Fiordiligi, Serena Gambaroni as Despina, and Julie Boulian as Dorabella. Here's the thing about this particular production, which is closed now at Covent Garden, and this lands entirely on Jan-Philippe Gloger's shoulders. Too many ideas. This happens a lot, in my opinion, with European directors, where there's simply too many ideas thrown at the stage. So here we had, in the overture, a dumb show of performers dressed in the 18th century taking a curtain call as if they had just finished a performance of Così fan tutte. The next thing we know is that characters are jumping over the edge of the stage from the audience and kind of breaking the fourth wall and becoming part of this production. Over the next 3.5 hours, we are dealing with a visual landscape of the 18th century and all the stage practices that go along with that, front lighting and drops and stage mechanics. But also we're seeing all the backside of that. We're seeing contemporary stagehands moving all the bits and pieces of the stage around. Why? I have no idea. This is the problem with continental European directors, is that they have so many ideas, all of which they're throwing at the stage, and just seeing what sticks. They're just seeing what lands. This is a problematic piece too, and for me, the heart of the problem is that I cannot believe that Fiordiligi and Dorabella don't know what's going on the whole time. I don't think you can stage this opera without acknowledging and making something of this idea. Do we really think that those two very, very bright women don't know what's going on. I don't think you can do that. And I think that's the beauty of De Ponte's libretto, is that he knows those two women have smelled a rat from the very beginning, and they have decided to play along with this in order to teach these men a lesson. And to Jan-Philippe Gloger's credit, that is a moment which he does get right. The final image of the opera is a flying drop that comes in, which spells out così fan tutti and Tutti. So notice that the final image that we see in this production is not just saying all women are like that, but everybody is like that. And that gesture alone, I think, saves this production. Great playing from the Royal Opera House Orchestra under the baton of Julia Jones. Definitely the opera highlight, although not my good call of the trip, which I'll get to in a second, was going to the Glyndebourne Festival. Glyndebourne, a country house estate in the south of England towards the coast, and is the granddaddy of them all. We could do a whole nother show on defining what English country house opera is in the summertime. I don't think it's something we really have in the U.S., despite the great number of opera festivals that we have in our country in the summer. But Glyndebourne is definitely the first, and although not the only, not by a long shot, is really the festival to which all other festivals are compared. It started, I believe, in the 40s, using the many buildings of the estate to house singers, to rehearse, to build sets. And I think it actually started with some rather humble beginnings. Not the case today. Of course, Glyndebourne now has become part of the English summer season, along with, the horse races at Ascot and Henley Royal Regatta. And this is one of those things that you want to do. I was lucky enough to get to go with a friend to Glyndebourne and see a production of Handel's Alcina, which I'll get to in a second. So there you are. Go to Glyndebourne, picnic ready for the long intermission of 90 minutes to give you plenty of time to eat between acts 1 and 2, or the first half and the second half of the opera. Black tie, definitely what to wear. I did not have that. I had a great outfit. But as I said to my friend before we went, look, I don't have black tie. I do have a great suit, but I hope that's going to be okay. And he said to me, well, typically I do wear a black tie. He's a regular at Glyndebourne. I do wear a black tie, but, just for you, I'll go off-piste, which was very generous of him. Definitely, I was the youngest person there, which, if you know how old I am, I think says something about Glyndebourne. And I'm going to get to the political fallout in a second. First of all, let's go to the show. Again, Handel's Alcina, featuring great arias, including Tornami a Vagheggiare and Verdi Prati, probably the two big numbers of the show. This production, which was directed by Francesco Michele and conducted by Jonathan Cohen with the Orchestra of the Age of the Enlightenment, was a new production for this season, and the first ever time that Alcina has been done at Glyndebourne. Again, there's a real similarity, I think, between this production of Alcina and the production of Così fan tutti that I saw at Covent Garden. Again, so many ideas, right? This was a production sort of set in the swinging 60s, I suppose, with Alcina's Island being a nightclub with sort of brutalist projections of brutalist architecture in the background, contrasted with the glitz and glamour of showgirls and gold lame and sequins and sparkles. So many ideas thrown at this stage. Some of them stick, some of them do not. Beth Taylor sang Bradamante with an absolutely powerful voice, which was just so dark and colorful. I also got to see Samantha Hankey as Ruggiero, who was absolutely marvelous. She's such a great actor, and hoping to get her on the show as well. Dance, of course, is a big part of the works of Handel, and this is a moment where actually the Francesco Micheli production really worked well, with a whole block of dancers, probably 8 total, using showgirl style and showgirl costumes. At one point, they were all dressed like peacocks with these long skirts, which bridged beautifully the idea of Alcina's power of turning the inhabitants of her island into animals and linking that up with a kind of Vegas showgirl style. And having all of that happen with some of Handel's great dance music was arresting and surprising. This production did not cause political fallout, but the overall arching idea of Glyndebourne did. Super simply, towards the middle of June, Dominic Raab, who is a prominent politician in the Conservative Party, attacked a politician, Angela Rayner, from the Labour Party, so the opposition, essentially, and said, "You are a champagne communist." That is Dominic Raab, Conservative, talking to Angela Rayner of the Labour Party. "You are a champagne communist by going to Glyndebourne. You think that as the Labour Party, you stand for the people, and there you are going to Glyndebourne." Well, it was a completely low shot, which made absolutely no sense. First of all, Angela Rayner's ticket to Glyndebourne was £60, which is a fraction of what it would cost to go to a Premiership soccer match or to see a major pop star in London. The irony, of course, that Angela Rayner was at a production at Glyndebourne seeing The Marriage of Figaro, in which a woman of lower class ultimately succeeds in beating her upper class boss, was lost on precisely no one. That irony was lost on nobody at all. And gratefully, Angela Rayner managed to put Dominic Raab in his place. To the condescendingness of the man made most people's skin crawl, I would say. At the end of the day, Glyndebourne really is about the entire experience. Not just what's happening off stage, but what's happening on stage and what's happening in the gardens as well. You're there for the entire experience. It is so memorable. It is a rarity to be able to go, and I can tell you I will be back.
This just in. The 2-minute drill.
All right, listen up. Here's everything you need to know about what happened in Operaland this week.
The backlash was swift after Renee Papa made homophobic and transphobic comments on Facebook. The comments opposing the Met Opera Chorus's participation in the New York City Pride Parade have since been deleted, and Papa has apologized to the LGBTQ community, alluding to his struggles with alcoholism. Papa was roundly criticized by members of the Met Opera Chorus, a number of his well-known colleagues, and was officially condemned by the Berlin State Opera.
In an interview with Van magazine, Peter Gelb reiterated his opposition to Vladimir Putin's war in Ukraine and said that he stands by the Met's decision to deplatform Anna Netrebko. Said Gelb, quote, "There's a difference between working with institutions in a country with questionable morals and working with institutions in a country trying to wipe out a people. You may disagree, but for me, a red line has been crossed."
Francesca Pia Vitale and Carles Pachon have won the top prize of the 2022 Neue Stimmen International Singing Competition. Ms. Vitale, a 26-year-old Italian soprano, presented the lament A mio cor from Alcina and Elvira's Mad Scene from I Puritani, while Pachon, a baritone from Spain and also age 26, offered Largo a Factotum and O du mein holder Abendstern from Tannhäuser. Both singers received €15,000, and Vitale also won the Audience Award.
Freelance Artist Relief Australia, founded by Nicole Carr to provide pandemic relief to artists, has become the Nicole Carr Award. The new award will be distributed as a prize for an Australian singing competition and includes travel and accommodations to Paris for a period of intensive mentoring with the Australian soprano Nicole Carr while she drinks expensive champagne.
Chicago-based CD Records has partnered with friends of the show Haymarket Opera Company to produce the first ever recording of Joseph Boulogn's opera The Anonymous Lover. Said the label's founder Jim Ginsberg, quote, "CD is excited to create the definitive recording of this opera, one we hope will serve as a reference for opera companies around the world as they stage their own future productions."
Teatro Regio di Parma has been given €650,000 by the Italian Ministry for Culture for eco-friendly upgrades to the theater, focusing especially on heating efficiency and keeping energy loss to a minimum. The 2-century-old theater will be upgraded over the course of the next several years.
In more Italian news to make American opera companies jealous, Opera di Roma has ended its fiscal year with a surplus for the 8th year in a row, with both ticket sales and core revenues having increased. Viva Italia!
In trade news, the Royal Opera House has appointed a new chair to its board of directors, Sir Lloyd Dorfman. Dorfman is known for slashing ticket prices for younger theater attendees in his prior position at the National Theater.
Semperoper Dresden is set to open its 2022-23 season in September with the premiere of Chasing Waterfalls, a multimedia program centered around and partially composed by artificial intelligence. The work will feature a computer-generated artificial intelligence algorithm in a number of roles, which will use the samplings of Norwegian soprano Eir Inderhaug to supplement the singers with its own voice in real time.
OBS listeners, did you know that the 2-minute drill was written by AI?
I wish.
On the disabled list, Bayerische Staatsoper has announced that baritone Artur Rucinski has withdrawn from upcoming performances of Verdi's Macbeth to be replaced by Craig Kalkoff. The other big B of German opera, the Bayreuth Festival, also announced a cast change. John Lundgren will no longer be singing the role of the Dutchman due to personal problems and will be replaced by Thomas J. Meyer. Flying Dutchman opens in August. You're a big B, Weston.
Tough break for Berlin to get left out of that crew. But in other news, red cards are back. The Bayerische Staatsoper has canceled multiple performances of Penderecki's The Devils of Loudon due to a number of positive COVID cases in the crew that rendered the opera unperformable, as though that was the only reason it would be determined as such. And, as we predicted, Jonas Kaufmann has canceled all performances of Cavalleria Rusticana at Royal Opera House due to long COVID.
But that's Weston's favorite opera, The Devils of Loudon, right? You have all the recordings of it.
All one of them. Exit stage right. English director Peter Brook has died at the age of 97. Brook was known for his often controversial experimental productions, from a collaboration with Salvador Dali on a production of Salome to a 90-minute reimagining of Carmen. Quote, "The one truth is that theater is a living experience," Brook said in 2019. "As long as it's alive, it's alive. We have a responsibility to not let the flame go out."
Famous for his interpretations of the cantatas and passions of Johann Sebastian Bach, Austrian tenor Kurt Equilutz has died at the age of 93. A member of the Vienna State Opera for 26 years, Equilutz participated in Harnoncourt's recording project of the complete vocal works of Bach on period instruments. Although a Baroque specialist, he had a wide-ranging repertoire from Haydn to Schoenberg via Mozart, Rossini, and even Verdi.
American mezzo Sheila Nadler has died at the age of 82. A native New Yorker, Nadler joined the Manhattan School of Music in 1968 and was a member of the Maria Callas masterclasses at Juilliard. She went on to have a notable international career and premiered the role of Marilyn Klinghoffer in John Adams' Death of Klinghoffer in 1991.
And on this day, July 11th, in 1786, it was the first performance in Vienna of Karl Ditters von Dittersdorf's opera Doktor und Apotheker. Bohemian tenor Joseph Tichatschek was born in 1807. He was the originator of the title roles of both Wagner's Rienzi and Tannhäuser. In 1925, it was the birth of both American soprano Matilda Dobbs in Atlanta and Swedish tenor Nikolai Gedda in Stockholm. And happy birthday to British-based Alistair Miles, who was born in Middlesex in 1961.
And that's your 2-minute drill.
that was Magische Töne from Karl Goldmark's opera, The Queen of Saba. That is an aria that I heard for the first time sung by Nicolai Gedda from one of those aria recital discs that nobody makes anymore. And that was so inspiring to me as a young singer, just thinking that, oh, you can sound like a lady but still be a man.
He is just one of my absolute favorite voices of all time. Like the ease with which he sang so many different types of repertoire, like ahead of his time for tenors.
Yeah,
Absolutely.
and now we have tenors who can specialize in that type of music. Not that anybody's doing the Queen of Saba, but you can imagine like a Larry Brownlee.
It goes Carmen La Boheme, Queen of Saba.
The Postillon for Longjumeau. All the classics.
Send us a voice memo or email us your hot takes at operaboxscore@gmail.com. You'll get a free OBS beer coaster and an OBS lapel pin just for sharing your own hot take. Check us out. Make sure you're subscribed. Let's get into the 2-minute drill here. Obviously, I think the big story, the one that's been sort of blowing up the internet, was the kerfuffle, homophobia, alcoholism of Renee Papa. This is kind of a weird story. Is there anyone who wants to jump in with a hot take on this one?
Well, I'll just say that Renee Papa's alcoholism is well known.
Yes.
And I didn't know that alcoholism causes you to become a bigot. I thought maybe he's just, how some people are like mean drunks. He's a homophobic drunk.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's very weird. I did see a screenshot of the initial comments, and they did read as homophobic and saying that he wouldn't perform at the Met again because they had to participate in this Pride parade.
He wouldn't want to come back to
Right.
Yeah.
Right, yeah. In fairness, there was a little bit of language barrier. The grammar wasn't very good, and he was obviously probably drunk at the time too.
And it's possible
So-
he was trying to be transphobic and not homophobic.
Yeah,
So we
it's
really
true.
shouldn't be putting him in a box. That could be on us. Maybe
We
he's just
need to be intersectional bigotry or no bigotry at all.
maybe he's fighting the moral panics of today rather than the moral panics of 20 years ago. Like, let's give him the benefit of the doubt. Yeah, the initial post is very hard to parse, but
Yeah.
but clearly negative and
Yes.
quite hateful.
In his apology, he did say that he claimed, or whoever wrote it for him, claimed that he was trying to express displeasure at the performative activism of the Met participating in a Pride parade, which,
Just like East Germany. Just like in East Germany, all the opera houses were required to participate in the local pride parades.
Right.
Everyone
Which is like-
knows this.
It's not something to like get that mad about anyway, but and then it goes right into the alcoholism bit after that. So it kind of feels like he's giving an apology and trying to excuse it at the same time. But it's also, there's enough plausible deniability, so you don't really know what the intention was.
I feel like
believe.
I feel like we are the generation, or I am the generation at least, that like first learned about like publicists through the
Right.
show Entourage, and I'm sort of
I learned
imagining
about them from The Parent Trap, but
Okay. I'm sort of imagining it as like, if Renee Papa was like a big star who had like a full-time publicist, like this is the episode where he or she is like, okay, how are we going to fix this? And okay, well, we have one last card to pull out here. We're going to come public with your alcoholism.
and totalitarianism, which I feel like isn't getting enough airtime in dissecting this apology.
Yeah, it's very weird. He did say he'd be pulling back for a while from performing and stuff and sorting things out. And if this was like an honest, like,
I'm going to go to a couple
bad
gay
translation.
bars. I'm going to go to one of those drag queens read children's books story time.
really do some soul searching. I mean, I was very disappointed when I read the comments, because I do like Papa as a performer, and also what a bold thing to be a little bigoted, at the company that
come
literally
out
just put
swinging.
on Boris Godunov for you. You know what I mean? It's very weird. I hope it was a result of. I mean, it's kind of weird to say this, but I hope it was a result of alcoholism and not deep-seated bigotry. But only time will tell. And if these kinds of things are any indication, time will tell if the bigotry is deeply held. So, yeah, we'll see what happens there.
Well, the Met Chorus in Berlin were not having it. They both released statements pretty immediately.
Yes.
Saying, nope, we're not dealing with this. And one good thing came out of it is that there are institutions now on the side of people who historically have not really had institutions on their side. But I think
do we know if he has lost a contract due to this yet?
I think he said he would be stepping away, but I don't know what that means. I don't know if he had anything actually lined up or not, or if he's cutting it off. I wouldn't be surprised if we hear about it being cut off, but I haven't heard of anyone.
It's too bad. It's too bad this interview probably with Peter Gelb probably happened before Renee Papa made his homophobic comments, or we would have been asked to make a comment on it.
This is kind of this is a long interview and has some really strong stances from Peter Gelb. Like, there are many times I was like, whoa, wow, look at you go, Peter, which is not something I say very much in regards to Peter Gelb.
No, very few do.
I think there was a lot of criticism of Russia in this interview. That was sort of the main subject that kept coming up. He also did bash Russia's anti-LGBT laws that are currently in place and trying to become more stringent. It really is. I think there was a lot of important statements that came out, maybe at the time that Renee Papa, needed to hear them. But I want to read a little bit of the quote here, if I can scroll down to the part I'm thinking of. Here's a quote. When Putin criminalized homosexuality 10 years ago, he did not implement this law himself. The Bolshoi continued to perform Nureyev ballets and do all that kind of stuff. I'm not saying it's right in any way. I'm just saying that there's a difference between working with institutions in a country with morals that are questionable and working with institutions in a country trying to wipe out a people, in regards to Ukraine and the LGBT community in Russia. And certainly I think that is the justification that Peter Gelb is sticking by, particularly in regards to Anna Netrebko, because I feel like a lot of companies are starting to be like, Anna can come back in. She's
she just today was posting clips of herself singing Aida in blackface again.
Oh God, was she really?
Over in Europe.
Oh no. Oh God. Well, I think it's very important to have this stance on Netrebko specifically, because no one, professionally speaking, is closer to Anna Netrebko than Peter Gelb. And he made the point in the interview that she might have apologized publicly and said, that she doesn't support the war or the anti-LGBTQ laws in Russia. But when it comes right down to it, he knows her and knows how close she really is to Putin. I think that's something that we've seen in the past. And once you add that to the blackface, I think it really is time to really let Anna Netrebko go. And I wish some of these companies in Europe weren't.
At this point, it really feels like she's doing it on purpose.
It really, really does.
Just to stick her thumb in the eye of people who are saying, maybe don't do this.
Yeah, you can only put your foot in your mouth so many times before you can't claim that you don't like the taste. You know what I mean? And it's one of those things that, I'm just so over on Netrebko, and Peter Gelb is too. And I'm glad to see him kind of catch up with the rest of us. In better news, I do want to talk a little bit about Cédille's Boulogne recording. Oliver, you were at the performance of the Haymarket Opera.
It was a really charming opera. It is a trifle. It is delightful, but it is not very substantial.
A little bonbon.
Yeah. And Nicole Cabell sounded like $1,000,000. And I went to the dress rehearsal, and like the general manager came out and said, Nicole is going to mark tonight because she's saving her voice for the performance, blah, blah, blah. So I was like, oh, darn it, And if that's what she sounds like when she's marking, it's like, yes, mark all the time. But my one thing that I want to say about Lamont Anonym
Anemone.
it's that I poop you not when I say that it has as much dialogue as it has music. It's equal parts dialogue and music. So it's really a play with songs. And this can be very challenging for the audience who doesn't speak French. And if I had my way about it, I would advise companies to try to find an English or create an English language script, like a dialogue, so that
Right.
we can follow along. But the music is great and the performances are great, and Nicole Cabell is amazing. So I'm looking forward to being able to enjoy that performance again when City records it.
And I'm very excited because it's going to be a period instrument ensemble as well, which is, I think, very important for this era particularly.
And it sounds like they've already made the recording, that they had some sessions after the performances to get that cast. So it's just getting it cut.
Yeah.
And putting it out there. I'm going to get it because, as we all know from last time, I was not able to get into the performance because I waited too long to get a ticket in that tiny theater, which was really, really tragic.
162 seats.
I thought you meant that no one over 6'4" was allowed in the theater.
Yeah, well, that was also a problem. There was we made a lot of progress on certain social issues, but the anti-tall person lobby is still strong, unfortunately, in the arts. I want to talk a little bit about all of these cancellations. We almost brought back red cards officially just because of what's going on, especially in Europe right now. And also the current variants going around. This is
everywhere.
I even here in Chicago, I believe it's considered high risk to be out anywhere. And, life is kind of proceeding more or less as normal without much cancellations. So it's a new era we're living with COVID instead of, trying to avoid it. For better or worse.
Jonas Kaufman has certainly gone back to living in the way that he was before the pandemic. Just canceling left and right. At least we have some consistency.
I hope he gets a speedy recovery. I want him to feel better so that, one day he will actually appear in a scheduled performance and we don't have to replace him with an AI algorithm like Semper Opera Dresden is clearly trying to do. This is actually a really neat project to me. I mean, obviously, whenever something like this happens, I feel like it's very easy to be like, oh, this is how the Terminators happen. But I was just thinking, like, if Terminators do happen, at least they should be able to sing a little bit. So to really capture the operatic nature of the robo-apocalypse, which is really, I think, what we all want in an apocalypse. I think that it's always nice to see opera adopting technologies that I feel like, obviously a few years ago didn't exist, but I feel like in my youth growing up, not too long ago, compared to, say, Oliver, I think there was a great deal of technophobia in the opera world. You wouldn't hear a lot of electronic instruments except in the most avant-garde productions in Europe. You wouldn't hear any amplification unless it was like absolutely necessary, and there wasn't really much in the way of artistic amplification. And I think that it's a really encouraging sign to see opera trying to like be more on the cutting edge instead of lagging behind a lot of the other arts. Though I'm only saying that so that the robot overlords don't kill me in the robo-apocalypse.
But in the movie that they will eventually make about the battle between humans and robots that occurred in the early 21st century, I think that'll be a really lyrical moment when they have like that cutaway to the first AI opera, and they're in the libretto was some clue as to what was going to happen. Yeah.
VC Darte.
I mean, we can all hope that the words of the immortal R&B girl group TLC don't prove to be prophetic when they sang, "Don't go chasing waterfalls."
All right, we have to end the show now. Goodbye.
Good call. Bad call on Opera Box Score.
All right, good call, bad call. We know everyone's bad call is the Robo-Apocalypse, but if you have anything more specific, Oliver Camacho, what do you got?
I've got a good call. There is a beautiful, beautiful, very long to read article that's in the New York Times Magazine from this past Sunday. It is called, I closed it. Let me reopen it again. I have a subscription so I can actually tell you the title of this. Is the future of American opera unfolding in Detroit? A profile of the dreamy Yuval Sharon, who is the artistic director of what is now called Detroit Opera. We have to get him on the show. But it's a big article, and if you do the option where you have the audio recording by Autumn read it to you, it's a 31-minute listen. So next time you have a half hour to kill, go ahead and listen to the Detroit Opera story from the New York Times.
Matt Cummings.
So I know that the theme of tonight is kind of publicist, but I just have to say that there was a statement released in regards to the new album by Freddie DiTommaso that just made me want to throw my computer across the room, where they were nothing against him. He's a wonderful singer. Everything I've heard from the album so far is great. But if your publicity team is hyping you up with your new album that is getting new release algorithm bumps on Spotify by saying that it's outstripping, that your performance of Nessun Dorma is outstripping the recording that Luciano Pavarotti made 35 years ago of the same aria, just like on a random week, because that is not a useful metric for anyone. It does
One
not tell
Pavarotti
me
streaming unit.
we cannot go down this road, or we will never get up. We will never ever have new recordings again. It's so hard to get them as it is.
Absolutely, and then the robots will win, and we can't have that.
Last up, good call from me. Just at the close of my trip, I managed to go to a Sunday morning service at St. Paul's Cathedral with my mother, and got super lucky that not only did we get to go to St. Paul's and get to go there for church, but also the choir and the London Sinfonia were performing Haydn's Nelson Mass. And of course, Admiral Nelson is buried in St. Paul's Cathedral. The acoustics alone are extraordinary. But to get to hear that piece of music within a religious setting that it was designed for in that space was simply overwhelming.
That's it for this week's edition of America's Talk Radio Show about opera. Our announcer is Norm Waddell. He's at normwaddell.com. Make sure you subscribe to our podcast to get the full show. On Stitcher and Spotify, you can click follow. If you listen on Apple Podcasts, just hit that plus sign. Send us a voice memo or email us your hot takes at operaboxscore@gmail.com. You'll get an OBS beer coaster and an OBS lapel pin just for sharing your own hot take. Our creative consultant is Oliver Camacho. Our audio and video editor is me, except I'm not doing video anymore, but I read what's on the page. For your co-hosts, George Cedarquist and Matt Cummings, I'm Weston Williams, asking you to continue the conversation about opera as you attempt to survive the Robo-Apocalypse. We're back with an all-new show next week where you'll get more opera headlines, more hot takes, and more unperformable Penderecki. Join us.